The following podcast is sponsored by Basico. At Basico, we understand your needs and pain points. Our expertise in CFO services, legal, finance IT, and people and payroll helps drive your business forward by inspiring change and challenging norms. We believe in deep explorative discussions and critical angles, the same spirit that fuels the Only Constant podcast hosted by our own Lasse Rindom. Discover more about Basico's vision and services at basico.dk. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please don't hesitate to share it with a friend. And now Lasse, take it away.
You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Gry Hasselbalch, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi Gry, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm super happy you're here with me today, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time.
Well, me too, Lasse. Thank you.
Also because I just got your book. It took a while actually to get it from the publisher, I think.
All right.
And they tried to send it by UPS and everything, so I was like, no, you have to just leave it. But that doesn't matter. And I think some of the points you're making in it is really, really inspiring. It's called Human Power, 7 Traits for the Politics of the AI Machine Age, and I have it right here. So I actually prepared, of course, an outset of some questions I'd like to ask you. But I decided to maybe go against that a little bit and then ask a different question to start off with.
That's much better.
Much better.
Yeah, let's do that.
Intuition, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I think, are we talking about the perfect algorithm versus the imperfect human? I think that's some of the perspectives you're sort of outlining as well in your book. I want to read a small passage because you talk about how most technology tries to make everything like smooth, nice surfaces, perfect, pristine data, pristine systems and all that. And then you say that the AI model needs predictability. It needs to reduce complexity. It needs patterns, and the classification system must be complete or it will not function effectively. That which is most human is immobilized, distilled in time and space for the system to work. But when is a human being ever complete? When is a society done? Are they not always in the making? Right.
Yeah.
And I want to just ask you a little bit about what you mean by this, because in everything we do in organizations and enterprises and in civilizations is to try to order these things. So is that a bad thing that we try to do that, or is that not the essence of the old ancient battle between Titans and the Olympian gods?
That's a funny way of putting it. So there's a space for both. No, so you're right. In society and in organizations, in history in general, we've always tried to kind of organize our reality to make sense of them. That's very human to do that. That's something we do with our intellect and what we call the rational or very mechanistic approaches, and there's a need for that. We can do science with it. We can make organizations work efficiently and everything. But at the same time, there's also always, throughout history, as I'm also trying to kind of show in my book, been moments where this kind of need or this urge to kind of conquer nature and organize our reality and make sense of it is kind of dominating our realities. And in these moments, and we can think of a moment like the industrial age with factories and management of spaces and people and machines. In these moments, the human being, everything that makes us human, like our biology, our needs, our lifetimes, our love, our creativity, our intuition, are put under pressure. And this is not a new thing. I mean, you've seen this throughout history. So what I'm trying to kind of point out with that quote, and also it's from the kind of the end of my book, the conclusion of my book, is to say that we're in one of those moments right now where there's a dominant culture of machines, a mechanistic approach that is kind of being promoted as a key value again in everything we do. And as human beings and all these human qualities we are put under pressure because all these human qualities, the biology, the emotions, the feelings, the creativity, are somehow kind of seen as a kind of machine noise in this machinery that we call the AI machine age. It's a noise that we have to kind of discipline to make sense within these perfect machines and systems. And so my point is to say, well, yes, of course we need organization, we need to optimize our organizations, we also need a rational approach in science, but at the same time we need to make space for all the other things that makes us human, and we need to use that as a foundation for actually the politics of the technology development that we have today.
You mentioned here some, the history of the modernity, and I like that. Whenever someone says something about history, I'm like, hey, I studied that. So by the way, did I mention that I studied? But anyway, and that always makes me think, okay, let's try to unravel that just a little bit, or unpack that, because I always think, back on modernity and that whole, maybe it started with the Enlightenment period. I think Jason Stanley pointed that out in an episode in His Only Constant. He said, that the Enlightenment also treated humans as machines, started to do it, right? But that it ended up in this violence of the Second World War. That I always say, in my interpretation of Second World War, was always, what you could call a pinnacle of viewing machines as replaceable parts, humans as replaceable parts. Exactly. So that was not just the Germans, there was also the Russians, it was also the Americans, it was everyone. Humans were just replaceable parts. Just like
Charlie Chaplin in modern times. You remember the picture where he's like stuck in the machine? No,
I don't know.
There's a very famous picture of Charlie Chaplin that is kind of in between the screws and bolts of the machine. So it's a very good image of that.
Exactly. So we become a replaceable part. But I think there's something else to it now, because I think with the way we're working with digital technology and with AI, the humans, they don't even become parts. Do they become useless, or do they become just echo chambers, or just simple, feedback surfaces for machines? Do they even matter? Because a replaceable part matters, right? I just wonder, are we talking useless versus machines here? Because
there is a kind of logic to it, and that's the one that I'm trying to tackle. No, there is a logic that somehow makes human beings expendable again, because there is a kind of repetition in history, and this seems to be kind of a reinforcement of a logic where we have this kind of society where it almost seems sometimes, I mean, we can feel it also nowadays when we're looking at the news and we understand what's happening. We feel there's this feeling of alienation, where you don't feel part of the machinery. You participate, you feed the machine, but somehow you feel more and more disempowered. I often think about it in terms of, the externalization of our knowledge and our communication. We've talked about that before when we talked in preparation for this talk, the way in which, me and you, we like to write, for example, our own posts, because we feel that they become an extension of ourselves, our own posts on LinkedIn, and it, imagine if you I know that it's very common now not to write your own communication. And it becomes externalized. We become alienated. It's almost like this kind of text and this communication could almost live outside ourselves. And you see it, like, for example, I was speaking to a younger child this morning that was writing a text, and she was incredibly proud. She said, "Listen, I wrote this all by myself. I had all the dates and numbers in my head. I only had to look up a few things." And this pride of having that internalized is something that I don't think a lot of young people or kids have at the moment.
My child 8, he loves to make factual books about beavers and weird shit. It's making around lots of different animals and things, and he makes all the pages. He writes it all, like, I'm like, yeah, this is it's awesome. Obviously, I think it's awesome, but it's still, this is a skill you will probably not need in the near future, writing about how a beaver works. Right?
I actually think you will need that in the future very much. I think many of these kind of human skills, and exactly that's when you look in a younger generation and you see the pride in their eyes, you understand when they produce something themselves, you realize that this is the time, that those moments and those prides and those capabilities are the moments where we make the connection between this kind of, as we said before, something is externalized and almost living its own life by itself. And I still have, that's also why I wrote this book. I do think that there is a great potential in human power. As I said, the 7 traits of human powers. I'm also saying that there's many other traits of human power, but now I chose those 7 ones. I do still think that there's a great potential that we're actually not being creative enough about. And I do think that when I see that pride in a child's eyes, that is what we have to build. For example, how do you build large language models that can interact with human beings in a way where they still preserve their right, where they still have their power to produce themselves.
How do we create pride? Is that what I'm hearing you ask?
Pride in human beings, that's exactly the point. One of my point, the reason why I wrote this book is also that I felt that first of all, the AI debate in general is very much talking down human beings. The idea that we can be replaced, that our intelligence is basically the same as an information data processing machine, and so on and so forth. It goes back to the 1950s, this idea. But nowadays, this is really so strong, and all the arguments behind, move fast, break things with AI, be the first in the world with AI, are built on this kind of talking down human beings, that we're not good enough, that our qualities are not good enough, that we need to progress, but progress not based on, exactly the pride in being, who you are and being empowered, but progress built on this kind of weird idea about we have a potential that we haven't reached yet. There's a human potential that we haven't reached yet, and we can only reach it through this kind of mechanistic machine reality,
But reading your book also, on the parts I have come through, I read lots of it. But the point is, I think your point is not necessarily, and you're obviously very critical of big tech, but I don't see your point necessarily being that they are inherently evil. I see your point more as being that they have too big a megaphone or a speaker. They have too much power to influence or say things.
It depends on how you define
because
evilness.
There's room for the rational, right? That's what is rational human as well, right? That thinks in these systems, right?
I think there's like a self-sustaining power that that is and as I said, it goes, if we look historically at it, it's something that didn't start last year or 2 years ago. It did start, all the way exactly as you said before, back to the Enlightenment, the idea of conquering nature and organizing reality and and making sense of a very senseless human social world, no? Through technology.
In essence, all the way back to building the first cities and the first writing.
That's what we always wanted to do. But, there also had to be a balance. And throughout history, there's also been, different ways of conditioning human life, where we valued human life and human capacities in different ways. So think about, for example, ancient Rome with very big symposiums where it was all about feeling and also hedonism and things, feeling and touching and living and eating and all these kind of things. And then you go to we know in Scandinavia, the Protestant ethic, the idea of, you have to preserve yourself, you have to be Puritan, had to be this Puritan living, closing up the body and everything to somehow reach the kind of the heaven after living a pure life, no? And today we have a different kind of value in human life, no?
It's actually. I was just looking. I made some big eyes because I started thinking about the Rome thing. Yeah, exactly. And just like you said, you made some eyes as well when I said that you don't think they're evil. You're like, maybe I do, right? So, but
it depends on how you define evil.
Yeah,
no?
exactly. But
so we can talk about that. But
there's just a balance thing between us. I think you began saying, but I think and I don't know what, and sometimes I don't know where this is taking me. But I think with Rome there was also this love of strength, right? You always, never, if you were weak, you were worthless.
Yeah. I'm not asking us to go back to.
The Christian values was that if you're weak, you are the first, and all that, and that's why there's a Reformation constantly built into every time the church became powerful, it had to reform itself. Yeah. It had this built-in mechanism for saying that if you're powerful, you're bad. So please change it.
No, right? But exactly my point is.
How can we build this? How can we build this violence this way?
Yeah. So my point about bring up those cases and examples from history is to say that there's always in history ways of kind of valuing human life in different ways, and I think that what we can kind of say, if we want to use those examples to think about and analyze the current moment we're in, we can think about what is it we value. If we want to look at human life, for example, how is it valued in a reality or in a kind of social organization where we basically are promoting very mechanistic values. So how do we think of human life? For example, now we can even talk about autonomous weapons. No, what's the difference between having a person sitting and actually analyzing the targets when you throw a bomb, or having an algorithm analyzing the targets and when they send a bomb? There's actually examples of, for example, in the way that bombs and autonomous weapons are being used in current wars, where the algorithm actually accepts a lot more casualties, civilian casualties, than was done before in previous wars. No, at this very moment there are wars where a lot more casualties are accepted, because it's you have a different. It's a very quantitative, datafied way of looking at human life. You count what's
so it enables this replaceable part thing, but it does feel like there's a different violence at play. I feel like the violence of the industrial age and the modernity was more about making blood into iron or something like that. We became a machine part, right? But it seems like more it's about making the mind into iron or something now, right? So I get that maybe we could be more violent, but and we see spurts of violence, but it's not at all on the scales you saw in modernity, right? Those millions and millions and millions of people dying in First and Second World War, just absurd numbers, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So,
but I would be just as violent. Is it the same?
There's different. You're completely right that this. So I brought up the idea that there's actually also physical violence aspects here. So not to forget about that. There's also actual human lives that are being sorted through, and we have so many cases of people who has been caught in the middle of an algorithmic system that has made decisions about them and all that. And
that's always a human body in the end, right?
Exactly. Yes. But what you're saying there about the human mind, actually I just came back from Cannes, where at the World AI Festival, where we signed a Cannes Declaration on the sovereignty of human thought.
Nice.
So and you might want to look at that. And this is actually the idea that there is a kind of barrier that is being broken down by, for example, LLMs, large chatbots, LLMs, all these kind of technologies that are designed to imitate and actually also directly manipulate the human mind, and in very invisible and intransparent ways, no? And so the idea is, we have in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there's the Article 18 on the protection of the right to conscience and thought, human thought and conscious, and this is kind of a reinterpretation of that right, because the idea was, of course, then to protect that you're allowed to, no state can interfere with your ideas, your religion, things like this. But now it's kind of have been trying to reinterpret this to say that there's actually a reason to protect legally also this kind of psychological sovereignty of the mind. So that's one part, and I very much agree that there is in the very design.
So it's so interesting. And I never thought about that, so I think it's super interesting with the because the human rights, exactly, the charter and says that you have your right to your opinion and your mind,
you do.
And and that's the whole basis of democracy. That's also why we've had
this is under
problems
attack.
with algorithms skewing democratic elections, right? We've been like, this is something here is working against democracy. But
and
what is it?
Exactly. And the reason why we signed this declaration, and many people were like, for example, Paul Nimitz, who's the kind of father of the General Data Protection Regulation, Brando Benifei, who was one of the EU parliamentarians of the AI Act, several two people from the original EU high-level group, expert group on AI, several people that signed. And actually we sat in a little room in a little restaurant, we developed the declaration and signed it and everything. And part of the reason why we did this was also because of this large manipulation of the human mind on large scale, on massive scale. We actually do have technologies like these that are being developed to manipulate and to when you use one of these generative AI systems, depending on which one you use, of course, but the most commonly used one, like ChatGPT, it's really, you can feel how it's manipulating your mind, how it's kind of making you think and feel in certain ways. It's speaking to your feelings. It's
not necessarily because it has a face.
No, of course not. It doesn't. It's just been designed it's been very deliberately designed to make you feel good about yourself, or to feed into your feelings, not your, maybe mostly also, as we've seen cases of, also into people's fears and paranoia.
Yeah.
We've seen several cases of people that actually were led to commit suicide, young people also, because it was reinforcing. It's actually
mental diseases they already had. Exactly. But I think also this is important because everything we do is based on some kind of authority, right? And I've also spoken about accountability, but you can't have accountability if you don't have any authority to act, right? So, but the authority is always vested in people, right? And in the American Isn't it the American Declaration of Independence that starts by "we the people"? But what if we change that to "we the shadows of algorithms," or we the algorithms? Who is the actor, right? And what is the mind behind the act? But of course, you always get these discussions then around, but aren't we all always, affected by each other and groups and dynamics? And
as I'm saying,
because I would also be surprised if you would be, knowing you a little bit, be super individualistic in your...
But so the point is that I'm saying that there's always these forces at play in history, and then it all depends on what do we value in society. And
you're making a hyper-liberal, hyper-individualistic argument, aren't you?
No. Well, you could say that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is about protecting individual rights.
Yes.
So, of course, I am a proponent of the Universal Declaration. And you were talking about a little bit before about, the violence of the Second World War, the industrial age went up to... But you know what came after the Second World War? Straight after the Second World War.
Yes.
You do know what I'm going to say right now, no?
Yeah, the Cold War.
No, the Second World War. So after the Second World War, of course, human collective action around multiple cultures and countries that went together to create the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
I could follow where you were going. The Cold War came after the Second World War. But
no. I was talking. No, so I was more saying that
Korean War.
No, the historian.
No, but this is the terrible date type historian. That's not me. Sorry.
Yeah, chronology. Yes. Yeah. No, I was more to say that I have a lot of confidence in you.
I don't have any confidence in myself anymore.
You should.
No, but exactly, yeah. So these collaborations, exactly.
Yeah. So this human collective action, it always comes at some point, and I have a lot of confidence in that. And I think that's it's more than just about individual human powers. It's about collective action put together to create some kind of agency in society, no?
But going back to AI, if we can't tell the difference between something you wrote and something the LLM wrote, or we can always say, it looks better this way, or someone will read it, right? I think I always use the image to... I've been asking myself, will we be consumed by this? And then I always end up saying that, no, we will stop consuming before we are consumed, because we are the only ones consuming in the end. So that's my hope for humanity. And I base that very much on the whole, we have unlimited Spotify, right? But people go and buy vinyls. But vinyls is also, a different physical product, right? I'm just afraid we will not learn to tell the difference in language, because language seems to be the same product. It's the same immaterial thingy-wingy here, right?
Does it matter that we don't see the difference as long as we know that there are still humans producing texts? I mean, you can't see love, for example, either, but that doesn't mean that it's not meaningful. And I think that it's very often also, I hear the same kind of thing about music and AI. I was in a radio program where they were asking about, can you hear the difference between this song and what's better? And I said, it doesn't really... at least I remember if I said, but I was thinking that it doesn't really matter. But what matters is that there is one of those two songs that I listened to that was created where there was a relation between two human beings, one that created, or many human beings that created music, others that are listening to it, and that connection was made. And you can't see that connection, but it's still meaningful, and that's why we have to defend it.
So what if you connect with an AI?
How do you want, or what do you...
You can do that. You can end up doing that. Sometimes it also, and some music could be, I feel this.
But you don't connect with a machine. You can't connect with a machine, but you can get feelings.
There's also pop music written by humans
you can get feelings.
That are very generic, that people still connect with, right?
I know. Connect in the sense that you can dance, you can listen to it, you can cry, you can also watch a movie you cry over or whatever.
What are you asking?
But it's a one-way communication. No, I'm not. I'm saying what I'm talking about, human connection.
I love that.
The human connection is not elitist.
No, it's not, right? But it's just will we know the difference when we're in the cave, right?
But it's not that
we just see
have
the shadows anyway.
The point is not whether we know the difference. The idea is that, as I said, as I used the example of love, the idea is that it's still there, that we can still feel it somehow, and it's there in society, even though we can't see it. No, so I think that's why we actually need to really defend it with law, with legal frameworks, for example, as they've been doing a lot in the EU now, with different kind of concrete actions to safeguard that there are still room for human artists, that there are still room for people who wants to write real books. And then, of course, there'll be loads of books that are written like communication, and some people will get something out of it. They will read a good book and they will learn something because these LLM gets better and better. There'll be a person that's really good at prompting it. Fine, whoever wants to read that, and whoever gets, maybe you need to read a book where you have to learn something about, how to design something or create a product. It's fine, it doesn't matter. But we need to create space for all the other kinds of books also. The ones that are written by authors, people who put their suffering and their heart and their soul in them. Like I did it with this book, no? This was my little, pet project for many, many years. I was writing this book on, many, many years, no? And it...
So you're not arguing for just, an eye of the beholder. It doesn't really matter what's coming. It just matters how it doesn't matter what the world does. It matters how you react to it. That's not what you're saying, is it?
No, it's not.
Because it could sound like that, saying that it doesn't matter. If it's AI generated books, or if it's a human, it doesn't really matter. How do you react to it? But that's not your point, is it? But you also said we need to make room for it, and I agree with that. But there's also a thing about how we sort of consume these things, don't you think? Or
well, that's about every time in history. Again, and apparently we like history, both of us. There's always been social movements, no? There's always been reactions about getting more. If you look at, for example, the Green movement in the 1960s and 70s, there was this kind of reaction towards, for example, cars that were producing too much smog. You had a social movement, and there would be people at the same time that would still like to drive around those huge cars and didn't care about it. And then there was the people who at the same time said, no, we need to preserve something. There's something unhealthy about these huge cars that are producing too much smog, and so on and so forth. And so I have a lot of faith in this idea that there are room for everything. I don't put most of it. I put some responsibility on us and human beings and the ordinary consumer, but I put a lot of responsibility on legislators and designers to create these spaces where there's room for both. No,
sometimes it feels to me like that we're not necessarily losing out on the smaller rooms, because I think also what social media and the internet has given us is tons of smaller rooms, even smaller definitions, smaller rooms, smaller identity groups, and revolts, or I don't know if you could say that, but small groups there are niche arenas for almost anything online. Right, today. But at the same time, I Walter Quattrociocchi, he mentioned in an episode that will be out tomorrow, actually, a professor from Rome, that he recently did a study on, and we didn't talk a lot about that on the episode, unfortunately, because I didn't know that article before. But he had done a study on social media and language there, and saw how language became more and more the same. It's sort of, we lost the outliers in language in social media. We did that already before AI, right? And so for me, necessarily, it's not that it creates fewer arenas, but just that it maybe impoverishes.
Yeah, it's
distinguished. They become more homogeneous in their expression.
Yeah, and that's also, I wrote an article last year about how AI is colonizing human language.
Lots of different meals, but they're all low on calories.
And not only, not only does it kind of pollute our LinkedIn feeds, where it gets more and more boring for some people, they don't care, but for some of us, it's getting very tedious to read, and it feels almost like machines speaking to each other.
It's obviously amplifying, I guess.
Yeah, but it's also homogenizing. That's a difficult word in English for non-native speakers, the world languages.
Yeah.
So if you look at, for example, how the main dominant elements are trained, they're not trained with much respect for very small languages. And we're talking about, in the world there will be 50% less of the smaller languages or something like that. And so what it's also doing is that it's part of this kind of colonization trend that we've seen throughout centuries, and now again we have the same problem with cultural diversity and languages, that this is really also having effect.
It's an aggressive homogenization, right? And the problem is that you can't really pollinate things if you don't have genders, right? And that is one of the things that I, on a very abstract level, metaphysical level, almost, I think a lot about, how do we be careful what words you're choosing, Lasse. How do we make sure that there are these different perspectives that can actually create the future? Where is the future here?
You only do that by tackling the current concentration
because
of power.
If everyone's the same, right? If everyone's the same,
yes.
and what you said with language is that when I read, I just reread your conclusion, right? And the quote I had before was also from your conclusion. You start by saying, "Is it a noise?" Right? A technology can have a faulty sound, a noise. You talk about noise,
yeah.
And that's one of the favorite LLM words in the whole world. Did you know?
No.
It's not just a noise; it's a signal. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how many.
That's depressing.
Yeah, and how many times it's regurgitated something I've written.
But that's probably because it's been trained
and
on.
Find the signal. It says that exact.
That's interesting. What I'm tackling in that is Daniel Kahneman's idea of intuition as a form of noise. Human intuition as a form of noise, and that's why I'm indirectly saying that that noise might not be noise. Maybe it's just a sound, and you can make it into music.
Yeah, as Aya would say, maybe it's a signal.
Yeah. So the point, it's all about, noise can be music in someone's ears while it is sound, or while it's noise in other one's ears. So it all depends on what perspective you look at it from.
But the point was for me just say that I ended up, reading that, and then I read it so much through the way I usually read. I say these words are AI. I'm pretty sure Gry did not do that.
No.
But
also because it was written before it was becoming absolute. I can guarantee you that, and it actually makes me. But that I think that it is because it's the reason why it's used is because one of the most famous kind of ideas of this is the Daniel Kahneman idea of human intuition as noise, and that is most likely been used and trained a lot.
I don't know, but the point is for me is just saying that this homogenization is also making it's more difficult to see. It all becomes the same, and you start realizing, looking for the sameness in things, and it is affecting my mind and my way of reading things as well, right?
And then also, if you yourself, for example, sometimes I'm thinking, was this model trained on something? Because I remember writing this. Something many years ago, I wrote this and this, and I go back and I'm like, whoa, this, because, if you've been sharing things, for example, I had a blog for years, like 20 years or something. Now it's there and I don't use it anymore, but it's out there in the open. It's most likely been used to train. And sometimes I'm like, I can see little bits of things that, and for example, the thing of noise, it has a history also. So I'm referring to Daniel Kahneman's argument, but originally the idea of electrical noise, and I think I also referred to it there, I have it from, I think that's more than 20 years ago that I had two scientists. I was sitting at a table with two scientists that were talking about electrical noise, actually, and having a conversation about that. And it's fun for me, it's a memory, and became kind of a memory that I kept looking at the world with a filter through. And so if you're telling me now that it's become a ChatGPT term, it feels like that violence that you were talking about. It feels a violence on my thought and mind.
But I have that, I used to be good at, these phrases like saying, it is not A, it is also B. I used to be very good at writing that. Yeah. But I can never write that again because AI does it all the time. So I've just lost a creative outlet that I was good at, these putting different zooming out and seeing different perspectives, different poles. It is not just, it is also, but now it's an AI phrase and it does it all the time.
Or the dashes. I missed it. I stopped using dashes because I'm afraid that I used to love dashes.
But what is the value of noise, right? That's also a good question. Maybe I should ask you, what is the value of noise really? Because I in astrophysics, the cosmic microwave background was initially just noise someone found, and it disturbed the instruments until they realized
that it's actually something valuable.
Yeah, that what we're seeing is the birth of the universe.
Yeah,
right? Come on.
Yeah.
That's exactly back to what I tried to say. How do we get to that if we don't accept these noise or these outliers? How do we pollinate? How do we impregnate the future if we don't have two genders or different people, different perspectives? If it's all homogeneous, right?
Well, the only way to tackle this is, as I said before, very, very concretely, it's legislation, and it's a very particular design culture. But most of all, it's like tackling, and I tackled that in my last book, Data Ethics of Power, which, as I told you before we started here, I said that was actually the prelude to human power, where I basically outlined, the different kind of, as I said, socio-technical infrastructures of power, where there's this competition between different forms of technological power, and biggest problem is this concentration of power that we have, and we have to tackle that. And one way we can tackle it is, and I think the EU was really good, and I have been, as I said, very involved in that process, with legal frameworks that are actually because we had a long period where things were running out of control with social media platforms and so on and so forth. Then we had a realization with the Snowden revelations, the Cambridge Analytica, looking at what kind of power was embedded in these kind of platforms that we were totally embedded in. And we had a revelation, and in the EU there was a very strong legislative reaction, a policy reaction, and we had a long period, like 10 years, where we have developed all kinds of legal frameworks that are really trying to pull that kind of development back into with focus on fundamental rights, on the empowerment of citizens, on protecting different rights, and then now suddenly it's kind of going in a different reaction. That's the only thing. But I do still have hope that the EU can still be kind of in the world. It can still lead this more.
But 110, 120 years ago, I don't actually remember when, the Americans, they sort of broke up these big railroad networks, right? To say, or to sort of make sure that it was not monopolized. And it goes back to what I asked you before about if it's really the technology or the size of the speaker that's the problem. If it's really the technology or if it's the power that's the problem. If it's really the technology or if it's the behemoth, large behemoth wrecking everything, that's the problem. And if we say it in EU and we make laws and everything, but these behemoths are still roaming.
And we have a geopolitical, very tense situation where the EU is put under pressure, and you can see that in the omnibus discussions at the moment. Then we also have a problem, but I think there's two sides to it. One is that logic that I talked about before, that kind of is behind, that is a force on its own, that is embedded in this kind of progress, industrial, also a very capitalistic logic, the logic of capitalism, that self-sustaining thing.
And the funny thing about that is that there's no progress if you don't pollinate and don't have the... Anyway...
Yeah, that's a different question.
That's a funny little...
The other thing is, the very concrete power infrastructures we have right now, which is something that I've always been focusing on my work, and that is something that is very and the geopolitical, that's one, like the digital laws we have, the AI Act, the data protection laws, everything is connected with geopolitics in general. So there was a momentum for this kind of defending fundamental rights. There was a momentum for that. There was for the ethics, for the if we need to regain control. There was a momentum for that, but then everything turned in the moment when the US got a new president, which was very interesting, no? And so that, that just shows that how we're really at the mercy of geopolitical powers.
And also, can we even do the regulations work if the digital infrastructure
is already not our own?
It's governed by behemoths, right? It's like with the railroads. Like I talked to Mikkel Fluerbo about exactly this. If the railroads suddenly were political or something like that, or suddenly,
but they always are. Infrastructures are always power.
Everything's power. I get that, but we want to try to minimize that and disperse it as much as possible. But we've sort of missed that. And can we in the EU even do anything about that right now?
Well, that's what the EU has been trying to do. The idea of digital sovereignty is not a new one. We've been working on that for
coming
the last,
from the EU and asking the American company to break up, it's not really.
Well, that is what the EU is, and it is still doing with the Digital Service and Markets Act, at the moment. So they are showing some force. It was stronger before, and if we kind of dismantle some of the key laws, which is actually some of the proposals. If you look at the omnibus proposal from the European Commission on the AI Act, I think there's some problems in terms of how much we're weakening something that was democratically developed in the EU and decided, and suddenly we want to dismantle it. So if we go in that path, we have a problem in terms of sovereignty, because of course we can build as many supercomputers and infrastructures in Europe, but if we don't have the laws to kind of create a level playing field, because that is what these laws are doing, then and create legal certainty. That's also, we say we want to make things more simple for companies, but then we postpone laws that have been established that should give a kind of legal certainty and create a level playing field between European and US companies, for example. So we're doing the US companies a favor, but all the companies in the EU that kind of needs to kind of do things in the right way, because this will be law, this is the reality we're working in, is actually not better served with this kind of approach.
So it's primarily the EU is falling. So what you're saying is the EU is falling behind because of an asymmetrical relationship with another entity that is not as regulated as the EU. So it's not the regulation that is ruining it, but it's the asymmetrical relationship with a key partner that is deregulating.
Exactly. There's not a level playing field, and there never was. If you look at the different approach, and that's something that me and Pernille Tranberg wrote about in our first book, Data Ethics, the New Competitive Advantage, that we published in 2016, which was all about, looking at the European way and the European companies, and exactly saying that there's the reason why some of these companies were struggling was actually because, they, and one reason why we thought they would have a better future was because it's like, again, the environmental movement, they're doing things the right way, they're considering ethics, they're doing things according to law, but they're also at the same time being outcompeted and competing. For example, if you look at some of the early social media companies in Europe, there were some that were in Norway and there were other places. They were outcompeted because there was not a level playing field. There was if you then talk to some of the the investors or the kind of the kind of entrepreneurs, American entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, what they would usually do, they had this idea, the usual move fast, break things. So you kind of move as fast as you can. And in the big data age, it was all about trying to break and move in gray zones of, for example, data protection regulation. No, European companies would never think of moving in gray zones of data protection regulation, at least not intentionally. No, so you see, as I'm saying, if you don't have law, you don't have a level playing field.
But don't you think also that and we've also seen this in the US, right? The lawmakers they don't understand social media. They don't understand LLMs. They don't understand what's going on. That in a lot of hearings, you've had these absurd situations where stupid questions are being asked, right?
Yeah.
And I spoke to Phil Lee in a recent episode about what I call lawmaker epistemology. That do they even know what they're trying to regulate, and is that a problem? Do you see that as a problem in your work? You for over 2 decades you've contributed to the European Union and global discussions on digitalization and artificial intelligence and all that. So do you see that as a problem, that they don't understand what they're trying to regulate? Because that's what a lot of tech proponents would also say. But also some other people that are both sides of the aisle would be annoyed that they don't understand enough to regulate the things that matter, and some would say they're regulating things they don't understand, right? So you get the point.
Well, there's this kind of also from the tech community, there's this kind of tech solutionist idea that you need to understand every single kind of if you don't understand exactly how a model works or exactly how the technical system is developed, then you cannot have an opinion about it. You cannot have a kind of a position on it. And I think that's a way of disempowering regulators and ordinary people as well. No, and we had the same with in the old days. I used to work with children and media literacy in schools. And one thing, I would also go to schools.
But you're not a child, so how can you have an opinion on it?
Exactly. So I would go actually and say, you're still a teacher. You still have an authority. You still know what's right and wrong, even though you don't understand exactly how this works. No? And I also must say that there's a lot more understanding. There are some very technically adept policymakers now, at least in the EU. I see some that really understand. The problem is then if you have someone that actually you're not allowed to not understand what you're working on anymore, especially not with digital and AI. So the ones I knows how things work, and at least they know how the kind of the legal implications of that. So it's not as bad as it used to be more true 10 years ago. I think it used to be more incoherent. The problem is if there's something that you don't understand and you don't have an insight, you are more adept to lobbyism and interest. There's a lot of interest in this kind of legislative process, and there it's important to know to separate the sheeps from the, what is it you usually say?
From the wolves, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you say, right?
No. There's another expression. It doesn't matter. To be able to kind of sieve through the
noise.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh God! Don't.
I ruined it for you. but I think that I just started thinking a lot about this. You said, but you can't talk about, because this kind of exceptionalism is something that's also I feel has become. And in many ways, there are many words you cannot say anymore, and don't talk when you talk to people. And I'm completely for that. Don't call a person a thing you won't call. They don't want to be called, right?
Yeah.
But then it always also translates into a heightened sense of you're not allowed to talk to or about me if you're not me.
Yeah.
And this is a difficult thing to tackle, I feel.
Yeah.
Because that's also what you're saying, tech, of course we can have an opinion, but can also then have an opinion about you, Gry, and how it is to be a woman.
Well, of course you can have an opinion about that, no?
Yeah.
Why not? This is a society where luckily democracy is about a lot of different, maybe not opinions. Laws are opinions.
But there's an estrangement in not having that conversation, right? In saying we cannot have this conversation, then we get estranged from each other because we don't interact with each other as well, right?
So the point is that we need to kind of preserve interaction, and we need to have a lot of different kind of input. So when you have a legislative process, lawyers legal lawyers will usually also have that, there are some communities that are, and I think it's some of these exactly working with the intellect and the mechanistic and rationalist approach, that usually is not very good at kind of understanding their own field from understanding that there's different ways of understanding their own field. So lawyers can be the same way, saying,
everyone can be the same way,
law is the only thing. I had a long discussion, for example, with a legal policymaker last week about how he was saying that why did we have an AI ethics high-level group? And I tried to explain and tried to say, before we had a law, and I said, because we needed to have a lot of stakeholders coming together to agree on the kind of, to create a momentum around and suggesting. We actually also did suggest a law, no? But, that's...
I want to go a little bit back to something you mentioned earlier about intuition. And I want to just ask you, because I know this will also unfold some of the ways you're usually thinking a lot. So does AI and capture both intellect and intuition, or none of them?
Intellect.
Yeah.
And you know that a lot of my thinking comes from the French philosopher Henri Bergson.
Oh, I didn't know that. I had no clue.
Oh God! Everyone that has heard me talking before, they're going to roll their eyes now. Now he comes. I tried to keep him out of the conversation.
Now I have you on the episode, so I want to get the prime Gry Hasselbalch as well, right?
So the philosophical foundation of Balk. It's okay. So the philosophical foundation of most of my work comes from the French philosopher Henri Bergson, who was actually also an inspiration for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But that's a different story. Henri Bergson, he was active around the last kind of turn of the last century. He was a Jewish French philosopher. He lived around the First World War, just at the beginning of the Second World War. And he was actually, in all his writing, he was tackling this kind of rationalist, first of all, this Newtonian world causality world picture and this mechanistic approach. And what he was talking about, he was saying there's two kinds of ways of perceiving. As he said, there's the intellect, and he talked about the human mind. There's the intellect and there's intuition. And there are two very different ways of perceiving and approaching the reality or world or whatever you're doing. It's not that one is better than the other, but they're very different. So one, the intellect is this kind of mechanistic, rationalistic approach. We can see it in, as he called, the clock time, where, you have a clock, you look at a clock and it goes from 1 to 12 or 1 to 24, and you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, or you have duration, as he says, that is a kind of a moving reality that you are continuously in the middle of, that you can only perceive through intuition. So this is the kind of time that is not separated and dissected in numbers or in instants, as he says. It's moving, constantly in creation. We know it, me and you, we're sitting here. We don't experience this moment in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We experience it in kind of a continuous movement, no? And so, one thing that AI certainly can do, and is really good at, it's really good at that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's really good at dissecting and representing things in data, making a logical conclusion, understanding, I don't want to use the word for understanding, but analyzing data. But it cannot, it's impossible for a machine to do what a human being can, be situated in this moment. And one of the things that Bergson was also using was the idea of memory. We are constituted by our memories, our place in history and time, our personal, us living human beings, and me being a certain age, living and moving, and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying here, I can give you another example. Should I give you another example?
You go on.
Yeah. So another example that I love to use, and I also use in the book, is again, to say that it's not say that there's one that's better than the other. There's one, and that's also what Bergson is arguing, there's one approach, one perception that's really good at doing some things, but there's other things that it's absolutely shit at. Sorry to use a bad word,
yes,
but it is really, no?
Yes.
So if you apply that, it will...
But the LLMs are getting better at the intuition part, aren't they? Because they're fluency models. I think Hasselbalch called them that as well,
Let me give you my other example, so I can tell you why they will never be as good as a human being, or why not... we shouldn't even compare them. That's more what I'm saying. There's no reason to put them against each other. So intuition is something different. It's not just, as Kahneman would say, quick judgment. It's something different. So in my book, I use the example of two detectives, Sherlock Holmes and Guido Brunetti. So we all know Sherlock Holmes very well. I don't know if you know Guido Brunetti, but I'll explain to you.
I gave you some eyes there. Like, I don't know who that is.
Sherlock Holmes, we all know. Sherlock Holmes, he's this has this logical, very analytical approach to very mystical problems. So he goes into a room, he sees something that seems, he goes, for example, the Hounds of Baskerville. You think they're ghost dogs, but in reality, I don't remember the story. Actually, it's someone that has murdered someone or murders a family members because he wants to inherit a castle.
I just read someone say that we should read it again because it's a good book. But I need
it's
to do
super good,
yeah.
And I read it some years ago and now I forgot. But there's a mystery there.
Other one, yeah.
So it seems very kind of out of this world. We don't understand what's going on. But Sherlock Holmes, he manages to kind of dissect this into very rational explanation. He sees the clues, and there's always a rational explanation. He deducts. He used this deductive
and the
approach.
other one is True Detective, or what? The series.
No, the other one is Guido Brunetti. He's a literary character. He's this kind of Italian commission, like police officer who goes around. He has this very humanistic approach. He has a lot of knowledge. He will go to human beings. He wants to understand and solve the mystery, not because he's like Sherlock Holmes. He just wants to solve the mystery because it's interesting and it's difficult to solve. While Guido Brunetti, he wants to understand the social implications. Who are the human beings? He has a fantastic relation with his family and everything. Sherlock Holmes, as you know, he's very cold. He has no relation to his, to anyone. No. And what I'm saying here is, okay, both of those detectives are great detectives. Both of them are solving the crimes in each their way. One in a very kind of humanistic way. For example, when he asks someone he suspects of something, he will kind of look at what's in his surroundings. There's one case where he looks at a book. He says, "Oh, you're reading this book," and they realize that they have something they can talk about together about that. Sherlock Holmes, in the other way, has a much more kind of direct, rational, intellectual way of going to things. No. So both of them solving mysteries, both of them in different ways, but one is probably more humane than the other. Yeah, one is prioritizing different kind of ways of interacting with human beings. It has different. He has different purposes.
I'm always conflicted. If you're sure it's more humane, because the other one is also the rational. It's also a very human thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. That's also what Bergson says. He says you can do both. We have both.
Because I'm always like, people I feel like there's often this, there's been some books around also saying that, we need to protect the human value, but I'm always like, but it's also a human thing to make structure and make order and organizations.
Exactly,
and
the best thing
let's please organize it so that we have enough food for the winter. Let's just do that as well while we go around feeling things, right?
And that's also what Bergson is saying, and what I'm also saying is that we can do both. The problem is that right now we are
overdoing one.
We are comparing the two and saying that one is replacing the other and is better and more important than the other. And there we go back to my argument about there's certain societies and moments in history where we are prioritizing one approach over the other without understanding that there's some moments where the kind of, what can we say, the humanistic approach or the intuition is more important, or not more important, but is relevant, and there's other moments where we need the more rational, logical approach.
I just realized a perfect analogy to this, and it's super nerdy.
Tell me.
Have you played Dungeons and Dragons before?
No, I actually didn't. My brother did, so I do know.
I think it's the second time I've mentioned it in the podcast. Actually, weird enough, I haven't played it that much. I play a lot of computer Dungeons & Dragons style. But the thing is, you have wizards, right, who can learn many spells.
I saw Stranger Things, so now
but a wizard can learn many. A wizard can learn many, but he apparently didn't see True Detective, because that's the True Detective there in that series. Anyway, actually, and it doesn't end in something solvable necessarily. Anyway, but a wizard can learn many spells, but he cannot necessarily use them at the greatest force, because he has to learn them and then he has to sort of build them up and incantate them, speak them to some extent, right? So he's not as powerful, right? Yeah. Whereas a sorcerer is this living in the power, like, you know, like a Jedi, just has it flowing through their fingers. They're not speaking the words and incantating, but they're just living it.
Yes,
but they can learn 2 or 3 spells, maybe, but then they can sort of throw them constantly, right?
Yes.
They're more powerful that way. So the intellect is, you know, broader, knows more, can do more, can organize more. But the other one is where the powerful is.
There you see, you know, I can give you a lot of other examples like those, and they all come and they're all perfectly great examples. And for some reason, we understand this intuitively, and we understand it in all fields, like in music, for example. When you talk to a musician, they'll say, I can do notes, I can play it rationally, things I've learned, you know, logically, I can do the instrument. But when I have to compose that piece of music, I use my intuition. I stand in the moment, I throw away everything I know, I jump into, you know it yourself, when you're creative, you go into this flow experience, you lose everything,
football, right? If you play FIFA and you make a good pass, okay, but if you do it yourself on a field and you're like, it's amazing, right?
And so in all other fields, it makes so much sense. When we talk about it, it is so logical. It's almost like it's a very simple argument, and there's no reason why those two should be put against each other and say one is worth more, one is more important in some cases, another is, and sometimes we need to use both at the same time. But
there's a power to being in the room. There's more power in that. That's what you're saying.
In depending on what you're doing,
scale power. No, exactly.
If you have to do medical research, there are things where you just have to analyze a lot of data, and a human brain can't do that. True. So it's great that you can do that. And then there's other cases where you would say, for example, we have so many cases of autonomous decision-making systems that has been used for example, providing or distributing welfare or for tax fraud. For example, the Dutch autonomous system that was running for 10 years and was actually targeting the wrong people and putting people in like awful financial crisis. Some people, I think I read also, even some ended up committing suicide or things like that. Those were, you know, really wrong use of that rational approach. No, really, really, really problematic.
You also have the wrong use of the other. So you're not arguing for rebel philosophy here in AI. It's not something where, you know, it's just about being, you know, back to the human feeling and all that. But
sometimes you need a little bit of revolution, and that's why I'm saying you need the human qualities as a kind of rebellion against the tyranny of the algorithm.
One of those persons, you know, some persons vote not on what they actually believe, but they vote on what they think society needs more of. Are you one of those?
I could be like that. I do think that there is need to defend and be more forceful, but you need to do it with some kind of historical grounding. You can't just say, I like humans because I like humans. No. We have a lot of that at the moment, and
that seems so hyped to me.
It's not, but it's not good for the cause.
And I also think it's the same hype as saying that we need more machines for machines and we need more humans. No. We need to discuss the purpose behind this, right? That's also the business mandate, I think. Taking the discussion not about what tech you want or if you want humans, but what you want to solve.
But I am a revolutionary in the sense that I think that it's really, because when we talk about human power, and I write about that in my book too, we often of course we're very disheartened at the moment about our own human power, because all we see is brutality, wars, climate change, everything. So we see, the domination, the exploitation, that kind of the human power as a force, no? But what I'm trying to say is to say, then try to step back and be a little bit, look at the potential, look at the kind of the forceful, beautiful parts of you. Look at the arts, look at the moments in history. I used the example of Tank Man, who just that tiny little Chinese man in 1989 that walks in front of the military tanks. I think it's the perfect picture when you look. You've probably seen the video. He walks up and he just stands all still. You have this tiny little fragile human figure, and you have no idea what is it that brings this man in front of these tanks to stop. And you can imagine
blood and steel, like back to that.
Exactly. And I think there's a beauty in that little figure that's standing, and you're thinking, is it love? Did he lose something on Tiananmen Square? Is he mad? Is he just crazy? Is he whatever? But there's a beauty in that. There's a beauty in Rosa Parks that's just for some reason decides to sit still in that bus when she decides enough is enough. No, there's a beauty in Nina Simone's voice when she's singing Mississippi Goddamn in relation to
but
that.
You like that, right? I think I noticed, because I notice words as well, like you do, right? And there's one point where you mentioned you make in your book you make a list of I can't find it, a list of human capabilities or something. Humans are something they love, blah blah. You can say something like that, but you always start by saying like they revolt, they love, they care, they feel sorrow, they and they
you have to understand that I've been in for the last 20 years. I worked with this kind of civil society approach. So I do, I used to be I used to have a little label under me if I was interviewed somewhere, some cyber activist. and we were actually sometimes saying this is not a fair way of calling us, because we're not necessarily
the first
activists.
cyber activist on the podcast.
Yeah. But I mean, it's actually a derogatory term, actually, in a way, because it's like not taking a person seriously, no? But I do have kind of a little bit the idea of revolution. I'm also talking about revolution, but not violent revolution in my book. I'm talking about a different kind of revolution.
No one really mentions violence anymore, right? This hidden violence, right? I hate that. I don't know. I don't think I hate it, because I would not have the other way either. But things feel so forceful, right?
Yeah.
On the mind, and it was a theme on my history studies as well, right? How confessionalism, how confessions after the Reformations in every part of Europe became something where you started doing mind control on people. That's sort of where it really started, right? Yeah. And then to now, just looking at these mind control things and how also how no one really wants anything with your mind except just to send you ads. I feel ads is mockery.
Your mind has become like a part of a machinery, no?
Yeah, but ads just feel like mockery sometimes, right? Because, I have your mind. So what do you want to do with it? Absolutely nothing.
You're completely right. And that's where we come to that idea of just, a society that is kind of just living on its own out there, like a capitalist logic that it makes no sense, not even to the people that are...
No, my kids are like, Dad, can we do this? No, I have to watch this ad, or I have to... What?
Yeah.
What
but that's
someone wants something right with me anyway. But also in our prep chat, you kept mentioning Debord's Society of the Spectacle. And why is this an increasingly important work today? And maybe it will bridge exactly what I just spoke about. I don't know if it will.
It does, because Gry Debord, that wrote the Society of the Spectacle in 1967, was a kind of a little bit of a revolutionary. There was many of those kind of revolutionary philosophers, Marxist philosophers at that time, and he was kind of part of that. The reason why I find the Society of the Spectacle, and I keep every time we were talking preparation for this talk, but also throughout this talk, I keep going back to his text. It's a book that basically describes this society where everything has been external, like the society is run by this, again, capitalist logic, where everything is done and lived through images, like spectacles, as he says. This kind of, it's a, and it's almost like a religion. That's, he's a, Marx was also talking about,
So a detachment from the real world and into labels,
where you basically just, it's something that it's a society that has become externalized, where everything living and lived is lived outside yourself. So you're very alienated. That's that Marxist thought that, for example, people that were working in the proletariat, that was working in the factories, were detached from whatever they produced because they had no, influence, no ownership of it. And this is the way and it's quite amazing if you reread The Society of the Spectacle again, because it's almost like reading a textbook on what's going on today. The only problem is, I think when he wrote it, it seemed like a really weird future world where, we were totally detached from all the political conversations, all the, the life, our clothes, our families, whatever. But today it seems like, well, that's just me looking at geopolitical conversations or Trump writing tweets or his Truth Social. It's not called tweets anymore, I guess.
No, but that's the problem. Maybe we can't even distinguish between the actual thing and the label, because we've lived in a world of labels for so long, or spectacles for so long, that when AI comes in and creates spectacles, we're like, yeah, okay.
Exactly. And he's also even talking about misinformation, Gideboard, and the thing that it doesn't really matter anymore. If the truth and the false, it doesn't matter, because it's just part of the spectacle. It is, there's this kind of living, and this society, again, the society of the spectacle is outside ourselves. It's living its own life out there, but it's still defining who we are and what we do among us.
Like also, I think Horkheimer Dawn also said there's this estrangement in knowing. Too much knowledge means that we stop knowing the whole of the body and the person as well, and how we sort of label. And like I said before, like we create small arenas everywhere, but we lose track of what's actually the conversation that we're trying to have with each other, right? And Zizek, Zizek with the
Zizek very much.
We want things without wanting the things. We get things without getting the things, right?
I've seen Zizek live actually in my old
special, right?
Yeah, but brilliant, I would say. And actually, he's also talking about this kind of religious, almost religious. I wrote an old chapter in my old book that's called "The Society of the Destiny Machine and the Algorithmic Gods," which is all. Yeah, it sounds very, but it was really. I wrote it in 2015, the first blog post, and that's my very, very kind of activist period, where it's like, let's revolt against these prediction machines with unpredictability. That's what I actually even made a campaign where it was all about, confusing the algorithms. No? So
that's funny, but how
it didn't catch on. I don't know. We didn't have that many followers on our Twitter account.
Have you seen people do that also on LinkedIn? There's been some posts where people write instructions for LLMs in the post, so they write a long post, and then it's small, so it confuses them. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of people out here also listening that will be like, okay, so how do we turn this into something that works for us? Because businesses work on logics and intellect, right? How do they then? What should they protect? What is the mandate? What do you want companies to do here? Well,
companies are not interested in going back to the kind of the industrial age modernity approach to organizations, So back in the 1920s in a factory, if you had to manage a factory, it was all about, you manage people and machines, like, as you said, bolts in the machine. They were kind of the same thing. So if you create if you had to manage a room, you would create a physical space where there was no room for factory workers to talk, because that was not efficient enough. And now today we have this kind of algorithmic management tools that are basically doing the same thing. And when you look at in the sense that when you look at how, for example, we hear of these warehouses in Amazon where they're using these automatic systems that are basically looking at or surveilling workers and looking at every time they take a break, for example, and and people get fired with no reason and so on and so forth because of autonomous systems and whatever. no organizations in Scandinavia or Europe or anything are interested in creating systems and organizations that are managing human beings in that way, in that kind of dehumanized way.
No, also because, factories and warehouses are commodities. Everyone can build those to some extent. If you have enough money, you can just build another one than your competitor. So you need to connect with people in a different way, right?
Yeah, want human organizations.
Or maybe you said Amazon. Maybe Amazon is exactly big enough to not care. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, but we do,
behemoths, right?
Yeah, we could always create non-dehumanizing organizations, but why would we do that? Most people that deploy algorithmic and most managers that deploy, for example, algorithmic systems, they really do it with good intentions. They do it because they want to, share knowledge within the organization, personalize things, do everything. The problem is, and most surveys say that the way that these systems are incorporated, people that are working and are being exposed to systems like that feel surveilled, they feel stressed because they're being rewarded through a data system and so on and so forth. No?
You also have this Tom Fishburne, the cartoonist. You've seen him. It's a funny cartoon. He makes brilliant business cartoons. Also on LinkedIn. You should definitely check Tom Fishburne out.
Okay.
But he has a comic where he says, someone saying that, the algorithm shows that, the surveys show that our clients value when we are authentic and personal, or something like that. And then the next frame is saying, let's quickly add that to the AI that produces our content, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it makes it, sometimes it's like saying, but why? Be more, be more creative, no? So
and more in the room, right?
Yeah, exactly. Use your intuition.
So this has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think I've really enjoyed having a cyber activist on the podcast.
Oh God,
and your voice.
No, that's one of those you should never mention because then now it sticks.
But now it sticks. Yes. So the cyber activist and the power of being in the room, or whatever I'll call this episode. No, I won't do that. Sorry.
Thank you.
But it's really been brilliant having you as a guest on The Only Constant. I think you've been a perfect voice for it as well, because these deep explorative conversations is exactly what it's all about. And I have one final question for you.
Yeah.
If you're ready for that one.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
So, Gry, what is the only constant?
The only constant is, and I'm building this on my favorite philosopher, Henri Bergson, is change. But not change in the way that we think about progress. It's kind of qualitative change. So, for example, Henri Bergson, he has this beautiful quote that I always use that says, to exist is to change is to mature, and to mature is to create oneself endlessly. And so, what Bergson is saying with that is actually that it's a fundamental life drive. He calls it elan vital. Metal, the heavy metal version of Bergson, no? Elan vital. It's getting late, dark outside. And so the idea is it's a challenge to this idea that you can actually dissect and immobilize human life. You cannot. Human life is in the moment, in the room, constantly moving, in dynamic change, and the idea is exactly so. If you're asking me what is the only constant, is the idea that we are in change. We have a creative evolution, as Bergson would say, no? And it has nothing to do with the kind of progress of quantitatively moving and getting better and better and better in the future. It's about qualitative change, no?
I think that's a great constant, and I think it is also, the old Heraclit to some extent, right? That you step into the river's never the same, but you also have to change to remain the river. The river has to change to remain a river, right? It has to have new water. If there's no new water, there's no river.
It goes through many...
So I say it's about being in transition, right? In many ways. And I've been saying that over and over lately, that we should not view each other as systems, but as interfaces.
Yeah. Well, and the point is about this concept of change is also, for Bergson's change is about openness. So he talks very often about open and closed systems, no?
Yeah.
So if you look at an AI system, it's very closed. It's trained on previous historical data that will then direct the future, and it will predict a very specific future built on that trained data. Immobilized past. If you put that next to the idea of change that I'm talking about, it's a kind of open kind of change. You know, both the past is open, the future is open, and that also means if you want to apply that to, you know, cultures, diversity, we talked about the homogenization of language, we're talking about then, you know, open systems, things where you are constantly open to something that is different from what you are in at this very moment. And we really need that at a moment where we have all these, as you said, silos of people getting into closing them in on themselves. So that form of change is really important, I think.
Not finding oneself, but finding each other.
Yeah.
Gry Hasselbalch, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you,
It's been brilliant.
Lasse Rindom.
Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague.